Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in this House today to discuss the government's proposed changes to bail and sentencing in Bill C-14. In order to better understand this bill, I believe we need to reflect on how we got to this point. Because while the Liberals are now acknowledging that bail reform is needed, what they are hoping Canadians will forget is that they have been in power for a decade and introduced the legislation that severely jeopardized the safety of Canadians. And before I go on, Mr. Speaker, I will be splitting my time with the member for Peace River Westlock. For years now, Canadian families, communities and neighbourhoods have witnessed the catch and release crime wave that has swept across our nation. The Liberals talk about the need for judicial independence, yet with Bill C-75, they took what used to be a judge's decision on granting bail after weighing and considering previous case law, and put their thumb on the scale by codifying the principle of least restraint, which directs courts and police to release accused persons, quote, at the earliest reasonable opportunity and under the least onerous conditions. For 6 years, the Liberals have told Canadians that they haven't ruined the bail system and that they're not responsible for catch and release policies that have led to a spike in crime. But let's look at some stats since they've been in power. From 2015 to 2023, auto theft is up 45%, extortion up 357%, gang-related homicides up 78%. Cars are being stolen from people's driveways while they sleep. Violent home break-ins have gotten so bad that police issue warnings for families to leave their keys at the door in the hopes that home invaders wouldn't come further into their house and endanger the people living there. Talk about creating a new norm of not only fear but helplessness as Canadians are feeling left to fend for themselves. To make matters worse, the Liberals added Bill C-5, which allowed for re-permitting conditional sentence orders or house arrest for serious offenders, including sexual assault. In many cases, this allowed violent abusers back into the homes and communities of the people they are a danger to. It also allowed for kidnappers, human traffickers, and people who abduct children under 14 to be given house arrest. Mr. Speaker, letting a violent abuser back into the very home of the people they are a danger to is not compassion, like the Liberals have claimed over the last several years. Just earlier this month, the Prime Minister said that letting violent sexual assault abusers off on house arrest is wrong and that they intended to fix it. It took 3 years for this Liberal government to figure out that letting people convicted of sexual assault serve house arrest was a bad thing. No intimate partner, family, or community should have to live in fear that someone who commits sexual assault could be given house arrest. While the Liberals have continued to put the rights of violent criminals ahead of victims, Conservatives believe in putting the rights and protections of victims first. Now, members opposite me from the Liberal benches will say they're bringing forward positive changes and that Canadians should be satisfied. That repealing the principle of restraint in C-75 will not solve the problem since there is a precedent set by court rulings. But what they fail to own up to, Mr. Speaker, is that they're the ones who created the precedents in the first place. In Bill C-14, the Liberals are proposing a change to clarify that the principle of restraint does not require release. Now, why would the government need to clarify that their legislation doesn't require violent offenders to be released unless it currently does just that? Having said that, this clarification does not repeal the least onerous conditions set out in the Liberals' catch and release bail laws, still provides a pathway to release, and remains the directive that is to be applied. Let's be clear. Conservatives have been advocating for changes to the broken Liberal bail system. We've advocated for the tools that our judges can use to keep violent repeat offenders off the streets. We've advocated for changes so the brave men and women who serve as first responders and police officers don't have to arrest the same violent repeat offenders over and over again. While C-14 does provide for outcomes that do prevent the overly broad catch and release policies that allow for repeat violent offenders to be withheld, it falls short of an actual repeal of the policy that made it possible in the first place. For years now, I, together with my colleagues, have stood in this place and shared the stories of what is happening in our communities and of the victims of the Liberals' soft-on-crime approach. Their broken bail system started 6 years ago. It has taken 6 years and too many devastating accounts for the Liberals to finally act and put forward any changes that reverse course on their disastrous bail legislation. What is the excuse for not acting sooner? Make no mistake, Conservatives have been right on this all along. We've never lost sight of the victims of violent crime or those who protect our communities. Mr. Speaker, our first responders and police officers put their lives at risk every single day to keep us safe. What firefighters do not need is to put their lives at risk putting out yet another fire caused by arson that's tied to an extortion investigation. Nor are police officers who have to arrest the same violent offenders who are out on bail dozens of times over, or the nurses and doctors who work treating the sick and wounded who have been victims of violent assaults in the hospitals they work in. To add insult to injury, the Liberals repealed mandatory minimum sentences on violent firearm offences, including robbery with a firearm, extortion with a firearm, weapons trafficking, and importing illegal firearms. How does this make our communities safer, knowing that the people who commit offences like these do not have to serve a mandatory prison sentence? It doesn't. Remove the mandatory punishment for committing a crime and watch the incidence of that crime increase. Direct judges to grant the least onerous conditions for bail that lets the criminals out the same day they committed the violent crime, and watch them continue to commit violent crimes. That is why Conservatives put forward the Jail Not Bail Act before this House. And while the Liberals have signalled they will not support the bill, it is an opportunity to take action that would protect victims. C-14 was inspired by the measures put forward by Conservatives, calling on the government to change course on their disastrous bail policies. However, it is still a half measure that after 3 years refuses to acknowledge the pain caused by allowing sexual offenders to be given house arrest while claiming to be standing up for the victims of their own policy. Mr. Speaker, even though the Liberals have proposed that violent sexual offenders will no longer be eligible for house arrest, they are also proposing with this bill that kidnappers and human traffickers will remain eligible for house arrest.
Thanks, Larry.
Conservatives have pushed and will continue to for legislation that cracks down on crime rather than encourages it. We disagree with the Liberal government's decision to keep the directive for judges to release offenders on the least onerous conditions, and will seek to ensure, through amendments, that kidnappers, human traffickers, and those who abduct children under 14 don't get to serve house arrest in the communities they are a danger to. I look forward to hearing the testimony that will be provided at committee once this bill is sent there, and I welcome the members opposite to ensure that they will be doing the same. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Question et commentaire. The member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister made a commitment to Canadians to bring forward bail reform legislation. We now have been debating now for a couple of days the bail reform legislation, and we want to be very crystal clear on this particular point. At the end of the day, we have an opportunity to be able to have bail reform legislation which is supported in every region of the country, most importantly in high demand from Canadians. We can have the legislation in law before the end of the year, pass through the different stages. What I'm asking is, will the member provide her thoughts? The only thing The only thing that can prevent it is the Conservative Party. Will she commit her personal thoughts in terms of seeing it pass?
The honourable member for Carleton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for that question. Look, the Liberals desperately want to avoid accountability for creating the issues that their disaster bail system through catch and release legislation, C-75 and C-5 have created. And while they are now telling Canadians reforms are needed, that we need to get this done quickly, it took them 6 years to clarify the principle of restraint doesn't require release. If C-75 didn't let violent repeat offenders out on bail, they wouldn't need to clarify it if it doesn't actually do that. Conservatives want solutions, and we will work to strengthen this bill to address the areas where it falls short.
Question et commentaire on la
The honourable member for Shefford. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. At the Standing Committee on we are concerned about a particular issue in terms of violence against women, and we've heard many concerns from victims of violence against women. And Section 810 of the Criminal Code, in collaboration with the Conservatives, we've been able to study bail and the impact that's had. We've been able to work with the Conservatives in committee on this, but the Bloc Québécois is going to look at this bill in committee, and we have a motion at the Status of Women Committee about this. But at a recent meeting, witnesses told us that what's really important is the criminalization of coercive control. So that's a request from victims. I'd like to know what my colleague thinks.
Eagle Creek.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I do thank my honourable colleague for the question. As I mentioned earlier in my response to the member opposite, we are committed to looking for solutions that will ensure that violent criminals remain in jail and that they are not released prematurely back into the community to cause more crime. This bill falls short on a number of issues. The principle of restraint, as I've spoken about, remains in place, keeping the culture of release even though tragic cases like that of Bailey McCourt illustrate the very real costs of releasing known violent offenders back into the community. And I do look forward to the interventions that will be made in Justice Committee on this bill.
Questions and comments. Honourable member for Brent. Brent South, Six Nations.
I thank my colleague for her speech. It was excellent. I'd like to follow up on her response to the parliamentary secretary to the government House Leader in terms of trying to make this better. You said it best that the government has had 6+ years to get this right, but since the election, which is almost 7 months removed, why do you think the government left out such substantive pieces of reform, particularly on the area of sentencing and on the area of bail reform? Why did they purposely leave out significant details when our opposition party has been giving them suggestion after suggestion for the last 7 months?
And again, just a reminder, questions to the chair. The honourable member for Carleton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I think that's a very good question, although I think this tends to be the modus operandi of the current government, that they introduce legislation that is deeply flawed and that doesn't actually address the problems for which it is supposed to be a solution. Look, these were the policy choices of this Liberal government that created the chaos that we have in our streets, that weakened deterrence, and that supercharged catch and release. And I believe that if they were truly serious about addressing the issues that have been brought forward by Conservatives and Canadians, they would have included those things in Bill C-14. Thank you.